Hello everyone, welcome back. What if the happiest day of your life turned into a nightmare? What if someone you trusted from your past came back to haunt you with a secret you never saw coming? In today's stories, we explore two terrifying experiences. A wedding ruined by a creepy gift that hides a dark secret, and an obsessed ex who'll stop at nothing to control your life. How far would someone go to invade your privacy? And when trust is broken, can you ever truly feel safe again? Stay tuned, because these chilling tales will leave you questioning who's really watching you. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Emily and I had just tied the knot at St. Paul's Church in San Francisco. The air was thick with joy, laughter, and celebration as we exchanged vows in front of our closest family and friends. But from the moment she arrived, something felt off. Emily's estranged cousin, Lily, who no one in the family really spoke to anymore, showed up with a man in tow. His name? Tommy. At first glance, you knew something right. The way he carried himself, the distant, almost vacant look in his eyes was unsettling. He didn't belong at a wedding, let alone with Lily. His clothes were stained, his arms marked with scars that hinted at a dark past. But we all smiled politely, pretending it didn't matter. Because that's what you do at weddings, right? You play nice. As the ceremony ended, we moved outside for photos, and the happy atmosphere quickly began to sour. Lily and Tommy were there, but it wasn't their presence that bothered you, it was the way they behaved. With every joke, every laugh from the bridal party, Tommy's voice would cut through the air, yelling out inappropriate, borderline menacing comments. "Come on, let's get this over with," he'd bark, disrupting the flow of the photo session. Lily would laugh awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable, but neither of them seemed to notice the tension building. It wasn't just the comments, it was the way Tommy moved, the way he lingered too close, his eyes scanning the crowd like he was waiting for something, or someone. Emily and I exchanged glances, both of us feeling a knot tighten in our stomachs. Something was wrong. But it wasn't until later, when the gifts started going missing, that we realized just how right we were to feel uneasy. Tommy had left his mark. And it wasn't just his unsettling presence. It was something much darker. After the photo shoot, the reception began, but the joy of the day had already started to fade. Guests were mingling, enjoying food and drinks, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I kept an eye on Lily and Tommy, but they were nowhere to be seen. My eyes scanned the room, but it wasn't until I noticed Lily sitting alone at a table that my unease deepened. I walked over to her, hoping to make small talk and get my mind off the growing discomfort. "Where's Tommy?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Lily looked up, her expression blank. "I haven't seen him in a while. Probably left," she mumbled, clearly distracted. But that didn't sit right with me. Tommy had been so vocal earlier, so present. He wouldn't just leave without saying anything, especially with all the gifts around. Emily and I began to worry, and we started asking family members to check the room where the gifts were being stored. That's when we got the news some of the gifts were missing. Tommy was the only person who wasn't accounted for. Emily tried calling Lily, but her phone was nowhere to be found. My stomach sank. Something was terribly wrong, and it was about to get worse. The party continued, but it felt like a hollow shell of what it should have been. The laughter, the music, it all seemed distant now. My mind kept circling back to Tommy and the missing gifts. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still here, lurking somewhere, watching. Just as Emily and I tried to push the thoughts aside, her phone buzzed. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but we both froze when Emily put the phone on speaker. The line was filled with nothing but heavy breathings, low, deliberate, like someone was standing just inches away from the phone. "Hello? Who's there?" Emily's voice trembled. The breathing continued, each inhale sending a chill down my spine. Emily's hand shook as she kept asking, "Where's Lily? Is everything okay?" Suddenly, the line went dead. We exchanged uneasy glances. "Was that Tommy?" Emily whispered. But we had no way of knowing for sure. I felt my pulse quicken as I realized Lily hadn't mentioned anything about Tommy's whereabouts. Emily quickly called her grandmother, who confirmed that Lily was staying with her. But Lily's phone, the one that had just called us, had vanished. Whoever was behind this knew where we were, and they were getting closer. That night, We tried to push the unsettling events from our minds and focus on the celebration we still had left. But the unease lingered, hanging over us like a storm cloud. We tried to relax, but my mind kept drifting back to the phone call, the breathing, and Tommy's sudden disappearance. The sense of dread I had tried to ignore was impossible to shake. Just when I thought we could finally breathe, Emily's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Lily asking for our home address. She claimed she had forgotten to give us her gift and needed to drop it off. At first, we thought it was strange, but we responded with the address, assuming it was just a miscommunication. We tried to go on with our night, but then came the knock on the door. It was too late for anyone to be stopping by. My heart skipped a beat. I opened the door cautiously, but no one was there. I stepped outside, looking around, but there was no sign of anyone. That's when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of something scraping along the windows. Someone was outside. We weren't alone, and it wasn't Lily. The scratching outside continued, sending a wave of panic through me. I rushed back inside, locking the door behind me. Emily was in the living room, her face pale as she watched me. I could barely form words as I explained what I had heard. We both knew this was no coincidence. I immediately called my dad. He had stayed back at the hotel to keep an eye on the house. His voice shook as he answered. "There's someone out here," he said, barely audible over the phone. "I've been hearing footsteps around the windows, and I swear I saw someone move in the shadows." I could hear his footsteps echoing in the background, his frantic pacing making my heart race even faster. I told him to stay put, to lock every door and window. But deep down, I knew that wasn't enough. Whoever this was, they were already inside the house, and my father's calls for help only made it worse. Minutes passed like hours, and my phone buzzed with an alert. I checked the screen, heart sinking. It was a notification from a security app, showing live footage from a camera in our living room. The image was grainy, but unmistakable. Someone was standing at the foot of the stairs, staring up at the camera with a cold, empty gaze. Tommy had come back, and this time, he wasn't alone. My heart was racing as I watched the live footage. There, standing at the foot of the stairs, was the unmistakable figure of Tommy. His eyes, cold and empty, stared directly at the camera, as though he knew we were watching him. A chill ran down my spine, but then, something else caught my eye. A second figure. It was shadowed, difficult to make out in the dim light, but it was there, lurking just behind Tommy. I frantically dialed 911. My voice cracked as I spoke, barely able to explain the situation. "Someone's in our house. I think it's Tommy, but he's not alone." The operator's voice was calm, assuring me that help was on the way, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the situation was escalating far beyond anything we could handle. As I looked at the screen, the second figure stepped into the light. It was a woman. Her face was obscured by a veil, but her presence was unmistakable. She was moving slowly, deliberately, as though drawn to something upstairs. I felt like I was losing control. My dad was still on the phone, and the sounds of banging grew louder. It was as if they were trying to break in. The police finally arrived, their sirens wailing in the distance, but it felt like an eternity before they reached us. The police arrived at the house, their flashing lights casting eerie shadows against the walls. But even with the officers standing just outside, I still felt a sense of unease gnawing at me. The silence in the house was deafening, the only sound the occasional creak of the floorboards as I stood frozen in place. The police cautiously entered the house, their radios crackling as they searched each room. I was on edge, my eyes darting to every corner, every darkened space, expecting Tommy or worse, the woman in the veil toe, appear from the shadows. They searched the living room, the kitchen, and the upstairs, but there was no sign of anyone. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. My stomach twisted. Where had they gone? Then, I heard the sound that made my blood run cold, the unmistakable rattle of the doorknob. The officers turned sharply, their weapons drawn as they moved toward the front door. I stood in horror, watching them as they cautiously opened it. No one was there. The porch was empty, just the silent, oppressive air that filled the night. But as one officer looked down at the ground, he froze. There, on the steps, was a single rose. The petals were stained red fresh, like blood. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. As they stepped back from the door, the rose lay there, innocent at first glance, but we all knew better. It was a message. But a message from who? And why leave it there, so carelessly placed like a signal? One officer carefully picked it up with a gloved hand, inspecting it as though it might hold the key to everything. The red petals clung together, soaked in something darker than just color, blood. "I'll take this," he muttered, his voice low and uncertain. "We'll need to get this to the lab." But the chill in his voice told me everything I needed to know. Nothing about this night was normal. My heart raced. My head spun with possibilities. Tommy, the woman in the veil, had they been here all along? Watching, waiting? What was the connection between them? And what was the meaning of the rose? The house felt colder now. The night's air outside seemed to creep through the walls, making every movement in the shadows seem like a threat. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still here, somewhere, watching us, but no one had seen them leave. And as the officers continued their search, I felt a chilling realization dawn on me: this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The hours that followed were a blur of confusion and fear. The police combed the house from top to bottom, but they found nothing. No sign of Tommy, no trace of the woman in the veil. It was as if they had never been there at all. But the unease wouldn't leave. It clung to me like a shadow, growing heavier with each passing minute. I kept thinking back to the rose, the blood, the message. Whoever had left it knew we were vulnerable, knew how to unsettle us. Later that night, Emily and I sat in silence, the weight of the events pressing down on us. We'd locked every door, closed every window, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching us. Suddenly, the phone rang. I grabbed it without thinking, my pulse racing. It was a message from Lily. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean for this to happen," the text read. But the words on the screen didn't make sense. And that's when I realized we were no longer in control. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore was drowned out by the pounding of my heart. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Sarah and I stood on Ocean View Beach, the salty breeze tousling our hair as we exchanged vows, promising forever. But from the moment I saw him, I knew something was terribly wrong. Jake, Sarah's ex-boyfriend, was there. He wasn't invited, but somehow, he appeared at the edge of the crowd, lurking like a shadow that wouldn't leave. My stomach twisted. His presence was a chill in the air, a sickening reminder of a past that Sarah had moved on from, or so I thought. But as soon as his eyes locked with hers, I felt the weight of his gaze like a physical blow. He wasn't just watching, he was waiting. The ceremony felt like it dragged on forever. I could barely hear the vows, could barely keep my focus. I couldn't shake the feeling that Jake was waiting for something, an opening, a moment to ruin it all. Every time I looked over, I saw him standing there, his face unreadable, but his eyes never leaving Sarah. A wave of anger and jealousy surged within me, but I fought to keep my composure. This was our day. As the reception continued, the unease grew. Jake wasn't just an observer. He was an intruder, weaving in and out of conversations with Sarah, his hand lingering a little too long on her shoulder, his smiles a little too wide. He didn't belong here, and the way he looked at her, like he was reclaiming something that wasn't his to take, made my blood boil. But it wasn't until later that night, when Jake handed Sarah a gift, that I felt the real danger. The teddy bear, so innocent looking at first, seemed harmless. But when Sarah opened it, my heart dropped. There, hidden inside the bear, was a small black device too well placed to be a coincidence. I froze. My mind raced. This wasn't just a gift. This was a message. And it was terrifying. The moment Sarah pulled the small device from the teddy bear, my heart stopped. The soft toy, which I had thought was a sweet gesture, now felt like a trap. My mind raced as I stared at the tiny, black object. What kind of device was this? Why was it hidden inside a bear? And why now? Jake had crossed the line. He wasn't just here as a guest. He was here with an agenda. "What is it?" Sarah asked, her voice soft, confused. I could see the hesitation in her eyes as she turned the device over in her hand. It wasn't something simple, no. This was intentional. Something that felt too personal, too intimate. But why would Jake do this? Why leave something so invasive at our wedding? I didn't answer. My gut was churning, my chest tight with a rising dread I couldn't explain. My mind told me not to make a scene, to push it aside, to let it go, but I couldn't. The night dragged on, but my focus remained on that bear. I couldn't stop staring at the device, the implications of it sinking in. Jake's presence, his insistence on being part of our celebration, felt like an unspoken threat, something dark lurking just beneath the surface. When we finally returned home to our new place, the unease didn't leave. The gift felt heavier than before, like it was watching us, waiting. Later that night, while we were settling in, I heard a strange sound, something faint, but unmistakable. It was coming from the teddy bear. I tried to ignore the noise, but it wouldn't stop. The faint buzzing, a soft mechanical hum, coming from the teddy bear on the dresser. I turned to Sarah, trying to brush it off. "It's nothing," I said, but I could see the concern in her eyes. Sarah walked over to the bear and picked it up. She held it for a moment, turning it over in her hands, as though trying to figure out what was wrong. The buzzing grew louder, a low, almost mechanical sound. It made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Ryan, something's wrong," Sarah said, her voice trembling as she set the bear down carefully. I rushed to her side, trying to calm my nerves, but the unease was overwhelming. I couldn't just ignore this anymore. This wasn't some innocent mistake, it was a clear message, a sign that Jake had crossed a line far beyond what I'd imagined. I grabbed the bear and gently squeezed it, feeling a small button inside the fur. The buzzing stopped for a moment, but then, the little device inside powered up. I tore open the bear, ripping apart the seams. My hand shook as I pulled out the small camera hidden inside its head. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just a gift, it was a spy device. Jake had been watching us. The weight of it hit me hard. He wasn't just obsessed. He was planning something, and we were his target. My hands trembled as I stared at the tiny camera in my palm. I felt sick to my stomach, my heart pounding in my chest. The implications were clear. Jake hadn't just given us a gift. He'd given us a tool to spy on us, to invade the most intimate parts of our lives. The camera was small, discreet, and hidden perfectly inside the teddy bear. It had been there, watching us, every moment since the wedding. "What the hell is this, Ryan?" Sarah whispered, her face pale. She could barely bring herself to look at the bear anymore, the betrayal settling heavily between us. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "He's been watching us, all this time." I immediately pulled out my phone, texting Jake's number. My fingers were shaking as I typed, "What the hell do you think you're doing? Why would you give us this?" I stared at the screen, waiting for any response. The seconds felt like hours. No response, just silence. I felt a rising panic in my chest. He was toying with us, watching from the shadows. But why? What did he want? This was more than just an obsession. It was a deliberate act of control, a manipulation I couldn't understand. We needed to take action. We couldn't let this slide. I called the police, my voice tight with fear. They told me to come in and file a report. But I knew deep down that this wouldn't be over until we confronted Jake. And that thought chilled me to the bone. What else was he capable of? The police took our statement, but their words did little to ease the fear gnawing at me. They seemed sympathetic, but I knew they couldn't just fix this. We were dealing with something far darker than a creepy ex. This wasn't about jealousy, it was about control, manipulation, and an invasion of our most private moments. Sarah and I spent the night in silence, the weight of Jake's actions pressing down on us like a physical burden. The house felt empty, even though we were both there. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still watching, that somehow he was always one step ahead of us. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A message. I quickly glanced at the screen, heart racing. It was from Jake. "I hope you enjoy the honeymoon phase. Just remember, I'm always watching." I froze. The message was chilling, a cold reminder of just how deep this went. My hands were shaking as I read it over and over, each time the words sinking in further. He was taunting us, playing a sick game. I told Sarah about the text, and she broke down. What if he's always been like this? What if we never really got away from him? I couldn't answer her. The truth was, I didn't know. I didn't know how long he'd been watching, or how far he would go, but I knew he wouldn't stop, and that terrified me. The next morning, we went to the police again, but they had no new leads. We were on our own, and I couldn't help but feel like we were being hunted. The days following Jake's message felt like they stretched into an eternity. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the lights, every passing shadow made my heart race. We had installed extra locks on all the doors, and I kept my phone on me at all times, waiting for another text, another sign that Jake was still lurking in the background. But it wasn't just the fear that wore me down, it was the constant questioning. How much had he seen? Had he been watching us before the wedding? Was he still watching now? Thank you for watching. Have you ever experienced something like this? Have you ever felt the presence of someone from your past creeping into your life when you least expected it? Or maybe you've had a creepy gift or a disturbing encounter that you couldn't shake off. If you've had a similar experience or have a story of your own that you think is just as chilling, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories and maybe share them in a future video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Who knows what we'll uncover next?